Okay, we're ready for lesson 6, and I'm going to call this lesson Putting Together Some Clown Pants. All right, so we've got our cutout pieces, the front piece here, and the back piece here. And you can actually tell the difference between the back piece and the front piece because the front has a really short curve and the back piece has a long curve, and that's to accommodate your booty. And then remember that we marked the right sides earlier so we could remember. So we'll open up the directions and read the first step. Okay, the first thing to notice about the sewing directions is here it's showing you that the shaded area is the right side and the kind of pale side is the wrong side. If this pattern was using an interfacing or a lining, it would look like this, but this pattern doesn't have much of that. So we're just looking at right side and wrong side. The step number 1 says stitch front to back at the inner leg seams. So if we look at the diagram, you can see the right sides are facing each other and the wrong side is out. And we're going to line up the back piece and the front piece, and we're going to stitch right down the inner leg seam. That's step 1. So let's go back to our patterns and the cutout pieces, and we'll line up the front to back for both of those cut pieces. Okay, here I have my right sides facing each other. So this is the wrong side. And you start by matching up these notches. So you can see I have a little notch here. You can kind of barely see it, but it's there. And then I have a notch there. You want to put those notches together and hopefully match up corners. But you're going to make those edges line up really nicely. And then when you get them nicely, you're going to put the pin in just right horizontal to the pattern actually. So the pin's going to go this way out. And that's because when you stitch, this is going to be on the right hand side where you can see the measure. Oops. Actually, you want to go the other way. I like it this way. Pin going this way. That way when you're stitching, you can easily just slide the pin out before you stitch over it. If you stitch over it, sometimes your needle will hit it. And if your needle hits the pin, it's going to it could break and it could also damage the machine. So usually it's best to pull the pins out if you can before, as you stitch over it. So, okay, so the finished pinned job looks like this. I've got my little notches lined up and then the pins are going, every like 4 to 6 inches or so down the inner thigh seam. Okay, now it's time to stitch this. Okay, once you have both of the pieces pinned together, so you should have 2 sets of front and back pinned at the inner thigh seam, then you're going to sit down at the sewing machine and we'll just take a look closely at the markings here on the plate. These are centimeters, so you have like a 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. And 5/8 inch is the seam allowance, and 5/8 inch is 1.5 centimeters. So the edge of your fabric is always going to line up with this line right here for this pattern. Your needle is going to be in the center, and on my machine, that's controlled here. If I go to the stitches, I can if I hit that button, I can control the needle position here. So you see this one shows the needle in the center, this one shows it to the left, all the way to the left, and this one shows it all the way to the right. Or I can push this button in and ease it to the right or ease it to the left right here. This one is the stitch length, so 2.5 is the standard, or I could go really long or really short or ease it both directions. So I'm going to keep it right here at 2.5 and I'm going to keep this right here in the center position. All right, so I've got my fabric in place. I've got the pins facing out so I can pull them out easily. And you're going to line up the fabric here right on the 1.5 line and then lower your foot. So since I'm doing this one-handed, it slipped out of position. So I'm going to shimmy it over here and lower the foot, okay? Now to start off, you want to start off a little bit ahead of where you want to start, because you can start with a reverse stitch. So this is the symbol for the reverse stitch, and see how the light comes up? That just finishes the stitch really nicely where it won't unravel. So you go backwards a little, like 3-4 stitches, and then you press this and come forward, okay? Okay, so here's the end. And then I hit my reverse button, go a couple of stitches, and I lift my presser foot. And I've got a handy little knife right there that I can cut my thread. Okay, and then I like to just kind of visually inspect, make sure that the thread wasn't loose or it wasn't doing anything funny on the other side. Everything looks good. I forgot to mention, when you're stitching something so long, make sure that you've got lots of space, because if one of these long pieces gets tucked underneath, you're going to be busy with your seam ripper, and that's not much fun. Okay, the next step is we're going to do the other front back piece. So we'll have 2 of those, then we're going to press the seam open. So we're going to get the iron ready in a second. All right, so here are the front back section with the inner thigh seam laid out on my ironing board, and what we're going to be doing is pressing the seam open. And after we press the seam open, that's going to allow us to make the next seam really flat, so there's no bunches and no wrinkles or anything weird. So we're going to basically press this out flat. The way I like to do it, and I think Mom probably showed me this, is she sort of like ran the iron one way across. First you pull the fabric tight, and then so that there's no wrinkle at the seam. Press it one way, then press it the other way. So you have kind of a couple of creases. And then you're going to open it up and press it right down the middle. And just make sure that you've got it's pulled nice and, you know, snug, so that the crease is right where the stitch is. Okay? All right, and then this is what it looks like when you've got it pressed open. Okay, so then we'll do the other one exactly the same, and then we'll be ready for the lesson number 7, which is part 2 of the clown pants.